In the shadow of her university's bell tower, a young graduate was about to face devastating family judgment. What started as a celebration took a shocking turn when they discovered her hidden truth. Molly Wilson wasn't your typical student. For 4 years, she had secretly built a tech startup, while her immigrant parents believed she was studying pre-med, known for her brilliant coding skills. When she encountered her mother's public rage after the ceremony, she had no idea her phone was buzzing with a $50 million acquisition offer. Molly endured shame that would lead to ultimate vindication. What began as parental disappointment would become generational healing through extraordinary success. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The cap felt foreign on Molly Wilson's head as she stood among her fellow graduates, the weight of the mortarboard, nothing compared to the crushing anticipation in her chest. Around her, families clustered on the university lawn, cameras flashing and voices raised in celebration. She searched the crowd for her parents' faces, her stomach churning with a familiar cocktail of hope and dread. There, her mother's elegant figure in navy blue, her father's familiar slouch beside her. Dr. Helen Chen stood rigid as a pillar, her expression unreadable from this distance. David Chen's gentle eyes found Molly's across the sea of black gowns, and he offered a tentative wave. Neither of them knew yet. Neither of them understood that everything they believed about this moment was built on careful omissions and artful redirections spanning 4 years. Computer science, magna cum laude, the dean had announced moments before, and Molly had walked across that stage feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. Her parents had heard magna cum laude from their seats in the back. They'd missed the rest. Uncle James was the first to reach her, his broad smile infectious as he pulled her into a bear hug. Pre-med graduate? Helen must be bursting with pride, following in her footsteps. Actually, Uncle James, Molly's voice caught slightly, I graduated in computer science. The words hung in the air like smoke from a struck match. Uncle James's smile faltered, confusion flickering across his weathered face. Behind him, Aunt Linda's congratulations died mid-sentence. Cousin Tommy, home from his own medical residency, stopped mid-stride. Computer science? Aunt Linda's voice carried across the small gathering, sharp enough to cut glass. But Helen said you were pre-med. She's been talking about your medical school applications for months. The words traveled like ripples across water, reaching every member of their extended family group. Molly watched her mother's face in the distance, saw the exact moment Helen heard Aunt Linda's voice, saw her mother's expression shift from proud anticipation to dawning horror. Helen's approach was swift and terrible, her small frame cutting through the crowd with the precision of a surgeon's blade. David followed a step behind, his face already creased with worry. Molly had seen that expression before, the look of a man who knew a storm was coming and felt powerless to stop it. What did you say? Helen's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the force of a shout. Her dark eyes fixed on Molly with laser intensity. What did she say about your degree? The family circle had gone silent. Even the ambient noise of the graduation ceremony seemed to fade as everyone within 10 feet turned to watch the drama unfold. Molly felt exposed, pinned like a butterfly under glass. Mom, I can explain. You told me you were studying pre-med. Helen's voice began to rise, her careful composure cracking like ice under pressure. 4 years. 4 years of lies? I didn't lie exactly. Computer science? The words exploded from Helen's lips as if they tasted bitter. You threw away your future for computers? After everything we sacrificed? Molly's phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, the vibration urgent and repeated. She ignored it, focused entirely on her mother's mounting fury. Around them, other families had begun to notice the commotion. She caught sight of classmates' parents glancing their way, their own celebrations momentarily forgotten. Helen, David's voice was soft, tentative. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Privately? Helen whirled on her husband, 25 years of marriage doing nothing to soften the edge in her voice. She's made fools of us publicly. Do you understand what this means? Mrs. Zhang, the Wangs, everyone at the restaurant, they all think our daughter is going to be a doctor. They think our sacrifices meant something. The words hit Molly like physical blows. Each one carried the weight of history. Her parents' immigration story, their years of 16-hour workdays at the restaurant, her mother's abandoned nursing career, her father's engineering dreams buried under the necessity of survival. Your sacrifices did mean something, Molly said, her voice stronger now. Everything I achieved. What achievement? Helen's laugh was harsh, brittle. Playing with computers? Building websites? That's what we came to America for. So you could waste your intelligence on toys? The phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. A voice message notification, then another. Molly's hand moved instinctively toward her pocket, but Helen's glare stopped her cold. Oh, perfect, Helen continued, her voice rising to a level that made nearby conversations pause. Even now, your computer games are more important than your family. It's not games, Mom. If you would just let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to us for 4 years. How you've thrown away the chance to help people, to honor what we built here. Helen's voice cracked, revealing the pain beneath the anger. I gave up my nursing career so you could have opportunities I never had. Your father worked 70 hours a week so you could focus on your studies. And this is what you choose? David stepped forward, his weathered hands raised in a gesture of peace. Helen, she's still our daughter. Whatever she studied. Is she? Helen's eyes never left Molly's face. Because the daughter I raised understood duty, understood sacrifice, understood that our family's honor. Don't. The word came out sharper than Molly intended. Around them, the celebration had effectively stopped. Uncle James looked stricken. Aunt Linda clutched her purse like a shield. Even confident Cousin Tommy seemed at a loss for words. Don't what? Helen's voice dropped to a whisper again, more dangerous than her shouts. Don't speak the truth? Don't acknowledge that you've brought shame on this family? The word hung between them like a physical thing. Shame. In Helen's mouth, it carried the weight of generations, the accumulated expectations of every ancestor who had struggled and sacrificed for their descendants' success. Molly's phone rang now, the sound sharp and intrusive in the heavy silence. Without thinking, she glanced at the screen. The caller ID showed a number she'd been expecting for weeks, one that could change everything. Marcus Webb, Technova Solutions. Answer it, Helen said, her voice cold as winter. By all means, prioritize your computer friends over your family. Show everyone exactly who you've become. But Molly couldn't move. The phone continued ringing, each tone feeling like a countdown to something momentous. Around them, the graduation ceremony continued its pageantry, but their small family drama had become its own universe of pain and misunderstanding. David's eyes met hers across the space, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Not disappointment, but a deep, abiding sadness. As if he were watching something precious shatter in slow motion, and felt powerless to catch the pieces. The phone fell silent. The call went to voicemail. Helen drew herself up to her full height, which barely reached Molly's shoulder, but somehow she seemed to tower over everyone present. When she spoke again, her voice carried the formal cadence of pronouncement, each word chosen with surgical precision. We are ashamed of you. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples that would spread far beyond this moment. Uncle James looked away. Aunt Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Cousin Tommy suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Helen, David whispered, but his voice carried no authority, only pain. Molly felt something inside her chest crack open, a fault line that had been building for years suddenly giving way. The approval she'd craved, the validation she'd dreamed of, all of it evaporating in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Emergency calls, the kind that suggested opportunity was slipping away while she stood frozen in this tableau of family disappointment. I see, Molly said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. I understand. But she didn't understand, not really. How 4 years of academic excellence could be dismissed so easily. How a degree that had challenged and excited her could be reduced to playing with computers. How love could feel so conditional. so dependent on meeting expectations she'd never fully grasped. The crowd around them began to disperse, the drama having reached its natural conclusion. Other families returned to their celebrations, leaving the Chens and their extended family standing in an island of uncomfortable silence. Helen turned away first, her shoulders set in a line of rigid disappointment. David lingered for a moment, his eyes holding an apology he couldn't voice aloud, before following his wife toward the parking lot. Molly stood alone among her relatives, her phone vibrating with increasing urgency in her pocket. Whatever opportunity was calling, whatever door was opening, she was missing it while her world crumbled around her. The irony would become clear soon enough, that on the day her family declared their shame, she was about to receive the kind of validation she'd always dreamed of. But success, she was learning, meant nothing when the people you most wanted to celebrate with had already walked away. Her phone rang again. This time, she didn't even look at the screen. Molly's hands shook as she fumbled with her dorm room key, the persistent buzzing of her phone a counterpoint to the silence that had followed her parents' retreat. The hallway felt endless, each step echoing with Helen's words, "We are ashamed of you." The phrase had carved itself into her consciousness, repeating with the rhythm of a funeral march. The key finally turned, and she stumbled into her room, a space that had felt like sanctuary for 4 years, but now seemed like a tomb. Graduation caps and gowns lay scattered on her roommate's bed, evidence of celebrations she'd never have. The walls, covered with coding certificates and startup competition awards, suddenly felt like monuments to her failure as a daughter. She sank onto her narrow bed, still wearing her graduation gown, and finally pulled out her phone. 7 missed calls, all from the same number. Marcus Webb, Technova Solutions. Her heart hammered against her ribs. For 3 months, she'd been in preliminary discussions with Webb's team about her AI-powered educational platform, LearnFlow. The app she'd built in her dorm room had somehow caught the attention of one of Silicon Valley's most respected acquisition specialists. But today, when her family had publicly disowned her, seemed like the worst possible timing for whatever Webb wanted to discuss. The phone rang again before she could decide whether to answer. Molly Wilson. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Molly, thank God. Marcus Webb's voice carried the kind of energy that made boardrooms listen. I've been trying to reach you for hours. We need to talk. Immediately. She closed her eyes, leaning back against her dorm room's thin pillow. Mr. Webb, I appreciate your interest in LearnFlow, but today isn't. $50 million. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Molly's breath caught in her throat. I'm sorry, what? $50 million. Cash. That's our opening offer for full acquisition of LearnFlow, including your proprietary AI algorithms and your commitment to lead the integration team. Webb's voice carried the casual confidence of someone who'd just offered to buy her coffee rather than her entire future. We want you, Molly, not just your platform, your vision, your leadership. The phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto the worn carpet. She stared at it for a long moment, wondering if she'd imagined the conversation. $50 million. More money than her parents had seen in their entire lives of running Golden Dragon Restaurant. More than enough to validate every choice she'd made, every lie she'd told, every moment she'd spent coding until dawn while her classmates partied. She retrieved the phone with trembling hands. Mr. Webb? I'm here. I know this is a lot to process, he said, and there was something in his voice, understanding, maybe even kindness, that made her chest tight. But Molly, your platform isn't just innovative. It's revolutionary. The way you've integrated personalized learning algorithms with emotional intelligence markers. We've never seen anything like it. Through her small window, she could see other graduating families loading cars, parents beaming with pride as they helped their children pack up 4 years of college life. A fresh wave of loneliness crashed over her. The timing, she managed. This is unexpected. The best opportunities usually are. Webb paused, and she heard papers rustling in the background. Molly, can I ask you something? Personal question. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Okay. Why education? You could have built anything. Games, social media, e-commerce. Why pour your heart into helping kids learn? The question caught her off guard. She thought of her parents' restaurant, of late nights watching her father struggle with tax software he couldn't quite understand, of her mother's frustrated sighs over English paperwork that never quite made sense, of immigrant families like hers, brilliant and hardworking, but always a step behind because the system wasn't built for them. Because, she said quietly, everyone deserves to learn in a way that actually works for them. Traditional education. It's not built for kids who think differently, who come from different backgrounds. My platform adapts to each student's learning style, their emotional state, their cultural context. It sees them as individuals, not just data points. Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. That's exactly why we want you. That heart, that vision, that's not something we can buy. It has to come from someone who's lived it. Alex Rodriguez appeared in her doorway then, still in his graduation regalia, his usually bright expression clouded with concern. He'd been her coding partner since freshman year, the steady optimist to her anxious perfectionism. His family had been at graduation too, his parents beaming, his grandmother crying happy tears, his little sister demanding selfies with the college graduate. Everything Molly had wanted and would never have. Is that Webb? Alex whispered, reading her expression. She nodded, and he moved to sit beside her on the narrow bed, close enough that she could draw strength from his presence. Mr. Webb, Molly said, I need to think about this. The offer is incredible, but there are complications. Family? His intuition was sharp. Molly, I started my first company when I was 23. I know something about family complications when it comes to unconventional career choices. The irony was so sharp, it almost made her laugh. Her family's shame over her worthless computer science degree delivered just hours before she learned that same degree had made her worth $50 million. Something like that, she managed. Here's what I'm gonna do, Webb said. I'm sending my car to pick you up tomorrow morning. Come to Palo Alto. See our offices. Meet the team. No obligations. Just a conversation between professionals. Whatever personal challenges you're facing, I promise you this. You're not alone. Success can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be isolating. After she hung up, Molly sat in silence with Alex, both of them staring at her phone as if it might ring again with news that this was all an elaborate mistake. $50 million, Alex said finally. $50 million, she repeated. Your parents? The question hung between them. Her parents, who'd worked 16-hour days for decades to give her opportunities. Who'd sacrificed their own dreams so she could pursue hers. Who'd just declared their shame at her choices in front of their entire extended family. They think I threw my life away, she said quietly. They think computer science is playing with toys. Alex was quiet for a moment, his engineer's mind probably calculating the same terrible irony she was facing. Are you going to tell them? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That was the question, wasn't it? The opportunity to vindicate every choice she'd made, to prove that her unconventional path had led somewhere extraordinary. But it felt hollow somehow. This validation coming at the exact moment when the people whose approval she craved most had withdrawn their love. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car will arrive at 9 a.m. Looking forward to our conversation. M.W. I don't know, she said finally. I honestly don't know. Through the window, the last of the graduation families were driving away, leaving the campus quiet and empty. Tomorrow, she would either walk away from the biggest opportunity of her life, or step into a future her family couldn't understand and might never forgive. The choice, she realized, would define not just her career, but who she was willing to become. The dining room at Golden Dragon Restaurant felt smaller after hours, its red lanterns casting shadows that seemed to dance with unspoken tensions. Molly sat at the familiar corner table where she'd done homework throughout high school, but tonight the worn Formica surface felt like a battlefield. Her mother moved between kitchen and dining room with mechanical precision, setting down dishes that normally would have made Molly's mouth water. Braised pork belly, hand-pulled noodles, the salt and pepper fish that had been her favorite since childhood. Tonight, Each plate felt like an accusation. Helen's silence was more devastating than her earlier outburst. She served the meal with the same careful attention she'd always shown, but her movements carried a rigid formality that made Molly feel like an unwelcome stranger. David sat between them, his weathered hands folded on the table, occasionally glancing between his wife and daughter with the expression of a man watching his world fracture in real time. "Eat," Helen said finally, her first word since they'd arrived home. Her voice was flat, emotionless, somehow worse than anger. Molly picked up her chopsticks, but the food felt like ash in her mouth. Every bite was a reminder of the hundreds of family dinners where she'd sat in this same chair, fielding questions about medical school applications she'd never submitted, nodding along to conversations about her future as Dr. Wilson, while secretly building code that would change her life. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. "Jennifer called," Helen said abruptly, not looking up from her untouched plate. "She heard what happened today. She wanted to make sure we knew how well she's doing in her residency. 18-hour shifts, but she's saving lives. Making a difference." The comparison hit its target with surgical precision. Jennifer Liu, her cousin, the golden child who'd followed every rule, met every expectation, become everything their family believed success should look like. "That's good for Jennifer," Molly managed. "Dr. Liu," Helen corrected sharply. "She's Dr. Liu now." She earned that title through hard work and dedication to something meaningful. David's chopsticks clinked against his bowl, the small sound unnaturally loud. "Helen." "What, David? Should I pretend this doesn't matter? Should I smile and congratulate our daughter for throwing away everything we worked for?" The front door chimed, and Mrs. Zhang's voice called out from the entrance. "Helen." "David? I brought some tea cakes for Molly's celebration." Molly watched her mother's face transform, the mask of public composure sliding back into place with practiced ease. Mrs. Zhang had been their family friend for over a decade, a pillar of their tight-knit community whose opinion carried weight in ways that still mystified Molly. "Mrs. Zhang," Helen called back, her voice suddenly warm. "Come in, please." The elderly woman bustled into the dining room, her arms full of pastry boxes and her round face beaming with pride. "Our little doctor! I've been telling everyone at the community center about your graduation. Mrs. Wang was so impressed. Her son is only in his second year of pre-med." The lie hung in the air like smoke. Molly watched her mother's face, saw the micro-expressions that betrayed her internal struggle, the slight tightening around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach its usual warmth. "Mrs. Zhang," Molly began, but Helen's sharp look silenced her. "You're too kind," Helen said smoothly. Molly worked very hard for her degree. It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. Mrs. Zhang settled into a chair, launching into a detailed account of her own grandson's medical school acceptance, each word another weight on Molly's chest. She found herself calculating. If she mentioned the Technova offer now, would it soften the blow? Would $50 million be enough to earn forgiveness for 4 years of deception? Her phone, mercifully silent during dinner, buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, she glanced at the screen. "Tomorrow's meeting confirmed. Car arrives 9 a.m. Excited to discuss your future with Technova. Marcus Webb." Helen's eyes tracked the movement, noting the slight smile that crossed Molly's face before she could stop it. "Something amusing?" Helen's voice was ice. "No, just..." Molly fumbled, sliding the phone face down on the table. "Nothing important." Mrs. Zhang looked between them, her social antennae picking up the undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. "Everything all right? You both seem tense." "Long day," David offered quickly. "Graduation ceremonies can be overwhelming." "Oh, of course. The excitement must be incredible. Helen, you must be bursting with pride. Your daughter following in your footsteps?" "Actually," a new voice interrupted from the doorway, "that's not quite accurate." Jennifer Liu stood in the entrance, still wearing her hospital scrubs, her usually perfect composure showing cracks around the edges. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally pristine appearance looked rumpled, exhausted. "Jennifer!" Mrs. Zhang exclaimed. Look at you, fresh from saving lives, just like I was telling your aunt. Molly graduated with a computer science degree, Jennifer said flatly, moving to lean against the wall. Not pre-med. She's been building some kind of tech company for the past 4 years. The words landed like grenades in the quiet room. Mrs. Zhang's mouth fell open, her celebration frozen mid-sentence. Helen's careful composure cracked, revealing the raw pain beneath. Jennifer, David warned softly. What? Jennifer's laugh was sharp, brittle. Are we pretending that's not what happened? Are we going to sit here and let Mrs. Zhang plan a celebration for something that isn't real? Molly stared at her cousin, trying to understand the anger radiating from her usually controlled demeanor. Jennifer had always been the perfect one, the success story their family held up as proof that their sacrifices mattered. I think, Mrs. Zhang said carefully, gathering her pastry boxes, perhaps I should let you family have some privacy. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. Jennifer remained standing against the wall, her arms crossed, while Helen stared at her hands folded in her lap. Computer science, Jennifer said finally, her voice containing emotions Molly couldn't identify. 4 years of lying about computer science. It wasn't lying exactly. What would you call it? Jennifer's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you got to choose your own path while the rest of us carried the weight of family expectations. The accusation hit Molly like a physical blow. Jennifer, I never meant. Do you know what it's like? Jennifer continued, her voice rising. Do you know what it's like to be the perfect daughter while watching you get to be human? To follow every rule, meet every expectation, become everything they wanted, while you got to explore and experiment and find yourself? Helen looked up sharply. Jennifer, what are you saying? I'm saying, Jennifer's voice cracked, that maybe Molly isn't the only one who's been pretending. The admission hung in the air like a confession. David's eyes widened, understanding dawning across his features. Helen's mouth opened, then closed, as if words had failed her entirely. Molly's phone buzzed again, and this time she didn't look. The Technova offer, which had seemed like salvation just hours ago, now felt like another weight pressing down on an already fractured family. The choice she'd thought was about her future suddenly felt much more complicated. In trying to forge her own path, had she somehow trapped everyone else in theirs? The Tesla that arrived at exactly 9 a.m. was pristine white, its silent approach almost ethereal compared to the rumbling delivery trucks that usually filled the university parking lot. Molly had barely slept, Jennifer's words echoing through her mind like a haunting refrain. Maybe Molly isn't the only one who's been pretending. She'd left her dorm wearing her best interview outfit, a navy blazer her mother had bought her for medical school interviews that would never happen. The drive to Palo Alto felt like traveling between worlds. Campus gave way to suburbs, then to the gleaming glass towers of Silicon Valley, where billion-dollar dreams were born in garages and 20-something entrepreneurs became legends overnight. Her phone had been silent since she'd turned it off after dinner, unable to face any more family drama or the growing pile of Technova emails that represented everything her parents couldn't understand. Technova's headquarters rose from the landscape like a monument to digital innovation, all curved glass and impossible angles, designed to make visitors feel like they were stepping into the future. The lobby featured a 3-story digital waterfall displaying lines of code that resolved into images of students learning, children laughing, adults discovering new skills through technology. Ms. Wilson? A young woman in designer jeans and a startup casual blazer approached with the kind of confident smile that spoke of stock options and unlimited vacation policies. I'm Sarah Chen, Marcus's executive assistant. He's so excited to meet you. The coincidence of the shared surname hit Molly like a physical blow. Chen. Like her mother, like the family name that carried the weight of immigration dreams and sacrificed ambitions. She wondered if Sarah's parents had also envisioned their daughter in scrubs, rather than Silicon Valley chic. The elevator rose smoothly to the 20th floor, revealing a workspace that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the San Francisco Bay, while employees worked at standing desks, beanbag chairs, and collaboration spaces that seemed designed to encourage creative collision. Molly Wilson. Marcus Webb's voice preceded him into the conference room, and when he appeared, he was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with graying temples and the kind of focused energy that made the air around him feel charged. The woman who's about to revolutionize education. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that had built empires from algorithms. But there was something else there too, a warmth that reminded her of her father's quiet understanding, an empathy that seemed to see past her nervous exterior to the potential underneath. Your platform, he continued, gesturing to a wall-mounted display where LearnFlow's interface glowed in vibrant colors, is exactly what we've been looking for. Not just adaptive learning, emotionally intelligent learning. Tell me how you got there. For the next hour, Molly found herself in the kind of conversation she'd dreamed of since freshman year. Marcus asked technical questions that challenged her thinking, pushed her to articulate not just what her platform did but why it mattered. She explained her algorithms with growing confidence, watching his eyes light up as she described machine learning models that could recognize when a student was frustrated, bored, or breakthrough ready. The emotional intelligence component, Marcus said, leaning forward, that's the game changer. Most educational technology treats students like data points. Yours treats them like human beings. That's the point, Molly said, her voice growing stronger. Traditional education fails so many kids because it assumes one size fits all. But learning is personal, cultural, emotional. My platform adapts not just to how quickly someone processes information, but to how they process it emotionally. Marcus nodded slowly. And this insight came from personal experience. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Watching my parents struggle with systems that weren't built for them. Watching classmates drop out because they learned differently. Watching myself succeed once I found the right environment. Tell me about your parents, Marcus said quietly, and something in his tone suggested this wasn't casual conversation. Molly felt the familiar tightness in her chest. They own a restaurant. Immigrants from China. They sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities they never had. And they wanted you to be a doctor. It wasn't a question. Marcus's intuition was unsettling in its accuracy. They still think I'm going to medical school, she admitted. Or they did, until yesterday. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with the intensity of someone solving a complex equation. My parents owned a dry cleaning business in San Jose, he said finally. Worked 16-hour days so I could go to Stanford. They wanted me to be an engineer. Stable, predictable, something they could understand. Molly looked up sharply, recognizing her own story in his words. I started my first company at 25, Marcus continued. Sold it for $30 million when I was 28. You know what my father said when I told him? What? He asked when I was going to get a real job. The shared understanding passed between them like an electric current. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression softening into something that might have been paternal. Success in this industry, he said, requires a kind of vision that previous generations sometimes can't see. We're building futures they never imagined, solving problems they don't understand. It's lonely. Did they ever? Molly began, then stopped, unsure how to ask if his family had ever forgiven him for becoming wealthy instead of conventional. My father calls me my son the businessman now, Marcus said with a slight smile. It took about 5 years and a couple of Forbes covers, but yes, they're proud now. In their own way. 5 years, Molly repeated. The hardest 5 years of my life, professionally and personally. But Molly, here's what I learned. You can't build the future while looking backward. And you can't wait for permission to become who you're meant to be. He stood, moving to the window that offered a panoramic view of Silicon Valley, the landscape where dreams became billion-dollar realities, where young entrepreneurs rewrote the rules of success. The acquisition offer is real, he said. $50 million, plus equity in the combined platform, plus leadership of the education division. You'd be working with the best minds in the industry, scaling your vision to reach millions of students worldwide. Molly joined him at the window, watching traffic flow along highways that connected her current reality to infinite possibilities. "There's one condition," Marcus added quietly. Her stomach clenched. "What kind of condition?" "You'd need to relocate to Palo Alto. Full-time commitment. This isn't a side project or a consulting arrangement. We need you here, building the future of education." The words hit her like cold water. Relocation meant leaving everything familiar, everything safe. It meant choosing her vision over her family's understanding, her future over their forgiveness. "I need time to think," she said finally. Marcus nodded, his expression understanding. "Take all the time you need. But Molly, don't let fear of disappointing others keep you from becoming who you're meant to be. The world needs what you've built. The question is whether you're brave enough to let it grow." As the Tesla carried her back toward campus, Molly stared out at the landscape blurring past, caught between two worlds that seemed increasingly incompatible. Behind her lay everything she'd ever known. Ahead lay everything she'd ever dreamed of. The choice was hers to make. The knock on Molly's apartment door came at 8:30 p.m., soft and hesitant in a way that made her look up from her laptop, where she'd been staring at the same email from Marcus Webb for the past 2 hours. Through the peephole, she saw her father standing in the hallway, holding 2 paper bags that she recognized as takeout containers from Golden Dragon. His shoulders were slumped in a way that made him look older than his 58 years. "Dad!" She opened the door, surprised to see him alone. In 22 years, she couldn't remember a single time he'd visited her without her mother. "I brought dinner," he said quietly, his English carrying the slight accent that became more pronounced when he was nervous. "Your mother's. She's not speaking to anyone right now. Thought you might be hungry." Molly stepped aside to let him in, watching as he took in her small studio apartment. The unmade bed, the desk covered with technical books and printed code, the wall covered with programming certificates she'd never shown her family. His eyes lingered on a framed photo from her startup competition win, where she stood beaming next to Alex, both holding a check for $10,000 in seed funding. "You've done well for yourself," he said, setting the food on her small table. The familiar smells of home, garlic, ginger, the 5-spice blend her mother made from scratch, filled the space. They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes, the food tasting like childhood and belonging in a way that made Molly's chest tight with longing. David Chen had always been a man of few words, preferring to show love through actions. Late-night drives to pick her up from study groups, quiet appearances at school events where Helen couldn't attend due to restaurant obligations. "I've been reading about your company," he said suddenly, not looking up from his noodles. Molly's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" "LearnFlow. I found articles online. TechCrunch wrote about your Series A funding round last year. Said you were one of the quote top entrepreneurs to watch under 25. His voice carried a mixture of pride and something that might have been regret. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question hung between them like a bridge she'd been afraid to cross for 4 years. "You would have tried to stop me." "Maybe." David set down his chopsticks, finally meeting her eyes. "Or maybe I would have helped you. You know I was an engineer once, before the restaurant, before we needed every penny just to survive." This was news to Molly. Her father's past in China had always been sketchy, reduced to simple narratives about seeking a better life in America. She'd never imagined him as anything but the quiet restaurant owner who worked 16-hour days without complaint. "You were?" "Software engineer. I worked for a technology company in Shenzhen, developing systems for manufacturing automation." His smile was wistful, tinged with the particular sadness of dreams deferred. "I loved it. The logic, the problem-solving, the way you could build something from nothing but ideas and determination." Molly stared at her father, seeing him suddenly as a complex person rather than just a parent. "What happened?" "Life happened. Your mother was pregnant. The economy was uncertain. America offered opportunities we couldn't imagine. But starting over meant giving up everything I'd built professionally. The restaurant was something we could understand, something that would feed our family while you grew up." The sacrifice implicit in his words hit her like a physical blow. Her father had given up his passion for technology so she could have the freedom to pursue hers. and she'd hidden that pursuit from him for 4 years. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what? For being brilliant? For building something that helps people learn?" David leaned forward, his weathered hands folded on the small table. "Molly, when I read about your platform, about how it adapts to different learning styles and cultural backgrounds, I understood something I hadn't before." "What?" "Why you needed to lie to us. Why our expectations felt like a prison instead of encouragement." His voice was gentle but firm. "Your mother and I, we pushed you toward medicine because it felt safe, stable, something we could understand and explain to our friends. But we were asking you to give up your gift." Molly felt tears threatening. "Mom doesn't see it that way." "Your mother is terrified," David said quietly. "Terrified that if you succeed in something she doesn't understand, it means her sacrifices were meaningless. Terrified that if you build wealth and success through technology, it invalidates the path she chose for herself." The insight was devastating in its clarity. Helen's anger wasn't really about Molly's choices. It was about her own abandoned dreams, her own sacrificed ambitions. "She gave up her nursing career when we came to America," David continued. "Her Chinese credentials weren't recognized here, and by the time she could have gone back to school, we had you and the restaurant needed both of us. I think watching you succeed in something she can't understand reminds her of everything she gave up." "Then how do I fix this?" Molly asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David was quiet for a long moment, studying his daughter's face with the careful attention he'd once given complex code. "Tell her about the acquisition offer." Molly's head snapped up. "How did you? You think I don't know my own daughter? You've been checking your phone every 30 seconds since I arrived, and you have that look you get when you're processing something big." His smile was knowing, tinged with the pride of a parent who understood his child better than she realized. "Also, Marcus Webb's assistant called the restaurant looking for you this afternoon. Something about confirming tomorrow's follow-up meeting." The revelation that her secret was no longer secret should have terrified her, but somehow it felt like relief. David reached across the table, covering her hand with his weathered one. $50 million they're offering?" he asked gently. She nodded, unable to speak. "Your mother needs to hear this from you. She needs to understand that your choices weren't rebellion. They were vision. That you weren't throwing away our sacrifices. You were building on them." "What if she can't accept it? What if this just makes things worse?" David was quiet for a moment, then stood and moved to her window, looking out at the campus lights twinkling in the darkness. "When I was your age in China, I thought success meant following the path others had laid out for me. It took coming to America to understand that sometimes the greatest honor you can give your parents' sacrifices is to use them as a foundation for something they never imagined." He turned back to her, his expression serious but warm. "Your mother and I came here so you could have choices we never had. Don't let our fear of those choices keep you from making them." "Will you be there when I tell her?" "If you want me to be." David moved toward the door, then paused. "Molly, whatever you decide about the acquisition, whatever path you choose, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you might become wealthy, but because you had the courage to follow your vision, even when it was hard." After he left, Molly sat alone with the containers of food that tasted like home, and love, and complicated family history. Her laptop displayed Marcus Webb's latest email, asking for her decision by week's end. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Alex, probably wondering how the Technova meeting had gone. But all she could think about was her father's quiet confession, the weight of dreams deferred, and the possibility that honesty might be the bridge between her family's expectations and her own truth. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between the safety of keeping secrets and the risk of sharing her success. Between the family she'd always known and the future she'd always dreamed of. For the first time since graduation, the choice felt possible rather than impossible. The pounding on Molly's door at 2:17 a.m. was frantic, desperate, the kind of knocking that spoke of emergency or breakdown. She stumbled from bed, still groggy from the restless sleep that had finally claimed her around midnight, and peered through the peephole to see Jennifer Liu standing in the hallway. Her cousin's usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her hospital scrubs wrinkled and stained, mascara smeared beneath eyes that looked haunted. Jennifer, what's wrong? Molly opened the door quickly, scanning the hallway for signs of whatever crisis had driven her cousin to her doorstep in the middle of the night. I can't do it anymore. Jennifer's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I can't pretend anymore. I walked out of my shift tonight. Just left. In the middle of surgery prep, Molly stepped aside, watching in shock as Jennifer, the golden child, the perfect daughter, the family success story, collapsed onto her small couch like a marionette with cut strings. This was not the composed medical resident who'd arrived at dinner with sharp accusations about lying and pretense. Jennifer, what happened? Are you hurt? Hurt? Jennifer's laugh was bitter, brittle. I'm dying, Molly. Slowly, day by day, becoming someone I don't recognize. Do you know what I was doing tonight? Preparing to assist on a routine appendectomy, something I've done dozens of times, and all I could think about was how much I hate it. How much I hate everything about medicine. The confession hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for years. Molly moved to sit beside her cousin, noting the tremor in Jennifer's hands, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of more than just long hospital shifts. How long have you felt this way? Since the beginning. Jennifer's voice was hollow. Since day one of med school, maybe even before. But I was in too deep by then. Too invested in being perfect, in making everyone proud. Do you know what it's like to spend 7 years training for something you hate? To be praised for excellence in something that makes you feel dead inside? Molly thought of her own 4 years of carefully constructed lies, of every family dinner where she'd nodded along to medical school discussions while secretly debugging code until dawn. But Jennifer's situation felt different, more trapped, more desperate. Why didn't you say anything? To who? Jennifer's eyes flashed with a pain that cut deep. To your mother, who lights up every time she talks about Dr. Liu. To my parents, who've already planned their retirement around the prestige of having a surgeon for a daughter. To Mrs. Zhang, who uses me as the measuring stick for every other kid in the community. The weight of family expectations, Molly realized, hadn't just shaped her own choices. It had crushed Jennifer beneath its enormous pressure. What would you want to do instead? Molly asked gently. Social work. The words came out in a rush, as if Jennifer had been holding them back for years. I want to work with immigrant families. Help them navigate systems that weren't built for them. I want to advocate for kids who fall through the cracks, who need someone to see them as more than just problems to be solved. The passion in Jennifer's voice was unmistakable, a stark contrast to the hollow tone she'd used to describe medicine. Molly could picture it, her cousin's natural empathy and cultural understanding channeled into something that gave her life meaning rather than just prestige. That sounds incredible, Molly said. Important. Important? Jennifer's laugh was sharp. Try explaining that to a family that measures success in doctor and lawyer titles. Try telling parents who sacrificed everything for your education that you want to take a massive pay cut to help people in ways they don't understand. The parallels to Molly's own situation were uncomfortable in their accuracy. Both cousins trapped by different versions of the same expectations, both afraid to disappoint families who'd given up their own dreams for their children's success. Jennifer, what happened at the hospital tonight? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. We lost a patient. Elderly woman, came in with chest pain. Simple case, should have been routine. But I froze during the procedure. Just couldn't focus. Couldn't make myself care enough to be as sharp as I needed to be. The admission was devastating. Did that contribute to... No, she would have died anyway. The damage was too extensive by the time she arrived. But Molly, I stood there watching her family grieve, and all I could think about was how I felt nothing. How I was going through the motions of being a doctor without any of the passion that makes doctors good at what they do. Molly reached for her cousin's hand, feeling the tremor that spoke of exhaustion and emotional breakdown. What did you do after that? I told my attending I was sick and left, Drove around for hours thinking about everything. About you, actually. Me? You had the courage to choose your own path, even if it meant lying to everyone. Even if it meant disappointing them. Jennifer's eyes met Molly's for the first time since arriving. I've been hating you for that. Forgetting to be authentic while I stayed trapped in everyone else's expectations. But tonight, I realized you weren't the selfish one. I was the coward. The role reversal was jarring. Jennifer, the family's pride and joy, envying Molly's courage to pursue her passions. Molly, the supposed disappointment, being seen as brave rather than rebellious. You're not a coward, Molly said firmly. You're trapped in a system that doesn't leave room for changing your mind. But Jennifer, it's not too late. You could what? Throw away 7 years of medical training? Disappoint everyone who's ever been proud of me? Prove that all those people who whispered about the pressure on Asian kids were right? The questions hung heavy between them, echoing the same fears that had kept Molly silent about her own choices for 4 years. What if, Molly said carefully, disappointing them temporarily was worth being happy permanently? Jennifer studied her cousin's face, something shifting in her expression. Is that what you did? With computer science. Molly thought about the acquisition offer sitting in her email, about her father's revelation that evening, about the choice that could vindicate every risk she'd taken. I'm about to find out, she said quietly. What do you mean? The words came out before Molly could stop them. 4 years of secrecy finally breaking open. I got an acquisition offer. For my company. $50 million. Jennifer's eyes widened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. 50 million? Molly? That's incredible. That's life-changing money. It's also everything Mom thinks is worthless made tangible. Everything she's ashamed of turned into something undeniable. Are you going to tell them? Dad thinks I should. He thinks it might help Mom understand that my choices weren't rebellion. They were building something meaningful. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation that her supposedly failed cousin had achieved the kind of success most people only dreamed of. I want to be there when you tell them, she said finally. Jennifer, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because maybe if they see that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary success, it'll make it easier for me to tell them I want to change mine. The alliance forming between them felt fragile but real. Two cousins who'd been pitted against each other by family expectations, finally recognizing they were fighting the same battle on different fronts. What will you do about the hospital? Call in tomorrow. Take some time to think. Maybe look into social work programs. Jennifer's voice grew stronger as she spoke. And maybe stop caring so much about being perfect and start caring about being honest. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside Molly's window, both cousins sat in the kind of silence that comes after breaking open secrets too long held. The choice ahead felt daunting but no longer impossible. Two women who'd spent their lives meeting others' expectations, finally ready to define success for themselves. The question was whether their family would be ready to accept those definitions. The Golden Dragon restaurant felt different after closing time, its red lanterns casting warm pools of light across empty tables that had witnessed 1,000 family celebrations. Molly stood at the entrance, watching through the glass as her father methodically wiped down surfaces with the same careful attention he'd shown for 20 years. The familiar ritual of closing, chairs stacked, floors swept, cash register balanced, represented the steady reliability her parents had built their American dream upon. Jennifer stood beside her, both cousins drawing strength from their unlikely alliance. In the 48 hours since Jennifer's breakdown, they'd spent countless hours strategizing this conversation, knowing that what happened in the next hour could reshape their family's understanding of success forever. Ready? Jennifer asked, her voice steadier than it had been since her midnight crisis. No, Molly admitted. But Dad's right. They need to hear this. David looked up as they entered, his weathered face brightening despite the tension that had gripped their family since graduation. Helen emerged from the kitchen, her expression carefully neutral, still wrapped in the protective armor of disappointment she'd worn for days. We asked you both to come because we need to have an honest conversation, Molly began, her voice stronger than she felt. About expectations. about choices, about what success actually means. Helen's eyes flicked between her daughter and niece, suspicion clouding her features. If this is about your computer games. It's not games, Mom. Molly pulled out her laptop, setting it on the table where she'd done homework throughout high school. It's a company, LearnFlow, an AI-powered educational platform that adapts to individual learning styles and cultural backgrounds. The screen came alive with her platform's interface, vibrant, intuitive, designed to make learning accessible to students like the ones who'd struggled in traditional classrooms. Helen's expression didn't change, but David moved closer, his engineer's eye immediately drawn to the elegant simplicity of the design. I started building it freshman year, Molly continued, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke about something she truly understood. After watching too many brilliant students fail, not because they weren't smart enough, but because the system wasn't built for how they learned. You mean you've been lying to us for 4 years? Helen said quietly, but some of the earlier anger had leached out of her voice. I mean, I've been building something that matters, while studying something that prepared me to build it. Molly clicked through screenshots of user testimonials, achievement metrics, the kind of data that spoke to real impact. We have over 200,000 active users across 15 countries. Students who were failing traditional classes are thriving. Kids who were labeled learning disabled are discovering they're just differently abled. David leaned forward, his engineer's mind immediately grasping the technical complexity behind the simple interface. This adaptation algorithm, how does it account for cultural learning differences? The question opened floodgates. For the next 20 minutes, Molly found herself in the kind of conversation she'd dreamed of having with her parents for years. David asked technical questions that showed he understood both the innovation and the challenges. Even Helen listened, her expression gradually shifting from defensive anger to cautious curiosity. It's impressive, Helen admitted finally. But Molly, this doesn't change the fact that you could have been helping people as a doctor. Saving lives, making a real difference. I am making a real difference. Molly's voice was firm but not confrontational. Last month, a mother in Guatemala wrote to tell me her son, who'd been written off by his school system, scored in the top 10% of his class after 6 months using LearnFlow. A refugee family in Detroit said our platform helped their daughter learn English while maintaining her connection to her native language and culture. She paused, watching her mother's face as the implications sank in. Mom, you gave up your nursing career when you came to America because the system didn't recognize your credentials, didn't understand your background. LearnFlow exists so kids from families like ours don't have to choose between their heritage and their education. The silence that followed was different from the angry quiet that had characterized their family dinners. This was the silence of shifting perspectives, of assumptions being challenged and rebuilt. There's more, Jennifer said quietly, drawing attention to herself for the first time since they'd arrived. Tell them about Technova. Molly took a breath, feeling like she was about to step off a cliff. Marcus Webb, the CEO of Technova Solutions, wants to acquire LearnFlow for $50 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. David's mouth fell open slightly. Helen's carefully maintained composure cracked completely, revealing the shock beneath. 50 million? David whispered. Plus equity in the combined platform. Plus leadership of their education division. Plus the resources to scale LearnFlow globally, reaching millions of students instead of hundreds of thousands. Helen sank into a chair, her strong frame suddenly seeming fragile. $50 million for computer games? For innovation that changes lives, Molly said gently. For technology that honors the struggle of families like ours by making sure other kids don't face the same barriers we did. The restaurant's front door chimed, and Mrs. Zhang's voice called out from the entrance. Helen, I saw the lights on. Is everything all right? The timing was catastrophically perfect. Helen's expression immediately shifted back to protective mode, the mask of public composure sliding into place. But before she could speak, Jennifer stood up. Mrs. Zhang, Jennifer called out. Perfect timing. You need to hear this too. The elderly woman bustled in, her sharp eyes immediately taking in the family tableau, Molly with her laptop open, Helen looking shell-shocked, David beaming with pride he couldn't quite hide. "Is this about the graduation situation?" Mrs. Zhang asked delicately. "Because I want you to know, Helen, that every family faces challenges." "This is about success," Jennifer interrupted firmly. "About what it actually looks like when young people honor their family's sacrifices by building something extraordinary." Molly watched her cousin with new admiration as Jennifer gestured toward the laptop screen. Molly didn't waste her education on computer games. She built a company that's changing how children around the world learn. And Technova Solutions just offered her $50 million for it. Mrs. Zhang's expression underwent a transformation that would have been comical if the stakes weren't so high. Shock gave way to calculation. Calculation to something that looked suspiciously like pride. "50 million?" she repeated, her voice carrying the same awe David's had moments before. "50 million," Molly confirmed. "For technology that helps kids like us succeed in systems that weren't built for us." Helen looked around the restaurant that represented 20 years of 16-hour workdays, of dreams deferred and sacrifices made. Her gaze lingered on the cash register that had funded Molly's education, the kitchen where she'd prepared 10,000 meals to support her daughter's future. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "How did we not know? How did you build something this significant while we thought you were studying to be a doctor?" "Because I was afraid," Molly admitted. "Afraid you'd make me stop. Afraid you'd see it as betrayal instead of tribute. Afraid you wouldn't understand that everything I built was possible because of what you and Dad gave me." David moved to stand behind Helen's chair, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Maybe," he said quietly, "it's time we stopped being afraid too. Afraid that success in forms we don't understand somehow diminishes what we built here." Mrs. Zhang, ever practical, was the first to break the emotional tension. $50 million, she said again, shaking her head in wonder. "Helen, your daughter is going to be more successful than any of us ever imagined." But Helen wasn't looking at Mrs. Zhang. She was staring at her daughter, and for the first time since graduation, her expression held something other than disappointment. "Show me more," she said quietly. "Show me exactly what you've built." Within 48 hours, news of Molly's success had spread through their tight-knit community like wildfire through dry grass. Mrs. Zhang, despite her promises of discretion, had apparently shared the story with just a few close friends, who had shared it with their close friends, creating a cascade of whispered conversations that transformed overnight into celebration. Golden Dragon Restaurant experienced something unprecedented, a lunch rush driven not by hunger, but by curiosity. The familiar faces that filtered through the doors weren't just customers anymore. They were pilgrims seeking proximity to success, drawn by the magnetic pull of a local girl who'd somehow transformed computer screens into $50 million. Molly sat in the corner booth that had been her homework spot throughout high school, watching the strange theater unfold around her. Mrs. Chen from the hardware store approached their table with the kind of reverent expression usually reserved for meeting celebrities. "Molly, dear," she gushed, her voice carrying across the dining room. "I always knew you were special. Remember when you fixed my son's computer in middle school? I told everyone then that you had a gift for technology." The rewriting of history was both amusing and unsettling. Molly clearly remembered Mrs. Chen expressing concern to her mother about children spending, quote, "too much time with machines instead of books." "That's very kind of you to say," Molly replied diplomatically, catching her mother's eye across the restaurant. Helen stood behind the cash register, her expression unreadable, as she processed the steady stream of congratulations and requests for details. Mr. Wong approached next, his weathered hands clasped respectfully in front of him. "Miss Wilson, my grandson is struggling with mathematics. Perhaps you could look at your platform for him?" Before Molly could respond, 3 more community members had gathered around her table, each with similar requests. Could LearnFlow help with English as a second language? Did she have any advice for young entrepreneurs? Would she consider investing in their nephew's food truck business? The attention felt surreal, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. These were the same people who'd watched her grow up, who'd attended her piano recitals and school plays, who'd expressed polite concern when Helen mentioned her daughter's quote, computer interests. Now they looked at her with the particular mixture of awe and opportunism reserved for local success stories. Jennifer appeared at her elbow, sliding into the booth with 2 cups of tea and an expression of bemused observation. "Quite the reception," she murmured, watching as Mrs. Zhang held court near the front door, regaling newcomers with increasingly embellished versions of Molly's achievement. "Listen to her," Jennifer continued, nodding toward Mrs. Zhang's animated storytelling. "According to the latest version, she, quote, always encouraged Molly's innovative spirit and, quote, saw the potential in her unique approach to education." Molly almost choked on her tea. "Last week she was telling my mother that computer science was a waste of my intelligence." "Success has a way of rewriting history," Jennifer observed wryly. "Notice how everyone suddenly remembers being supportive?" The phenomenon was fascinating in its predictability. The same community that had quietly disapproved of Molly's unconventional choices now claimed ownership of her success. Every computer problem they'd ever asked her to solve became evidence of their early recognition of her talent. Every casual conversation about technology became a prescient prediction of her future achievements. Helen emerged from behind the counter, moving through the crowd with the grace of someone who'd spent decades managing the social dynamics of a community restaurant. She approached their table, her expression complex, part pride, part bewilderment, part something that might have been protective concern. "How are you handling all this?" she asked quietly, settling into the booth beside Jennifer. "It's overwhelming," Molly admitted. "Yesterday I was the family disappointment. Today I'm some kind of local hero. Neither feels particularly real." Helen was quiet for a moment, watching as Mr. Kim approached their table with his business card and what was clearly a prepared pitch for some kind of partnership opportunity. "I owe you an apology," Helen said suddenly, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's buzz. "Not just for graduation day, but for years of not understanding what you were building. For making you feel like you had to hide your achievements from the people who should have been celebrating them." The admission hit Molly with unexpected force. This was the validation she'd craved for 4 years. Not the community's opportunistic celebration, but her mother's genuine recognition of her journey. "Mom, no, let me finish." Helen's voice grew stronger. "I spent so much time being afraid that your unconventional path meant our sacrifices were meaningless that I couldn't see you were actually honoring them. Building something that helps families like ours, that breaks down the barriers we faced, that's not betrayal. That's legacy." Jennifer reached across the table, squeezing Molly's hand as the weight of genuine family acceptance finally settled around them. Outside, the community celebration continued, but in their small corner booth, something more precious was taking shape, the kind of understanding that no amount of external validation could provide. The Technova deadline loomed like a thundercloud on the horizon, 72 hours to make a decision that would reshape everything. Molly sat in her apartment at 3 a.m., surrounded by printouts of acquisition documents and legal contracts that felt like roadmaps to a future she could barely imagine. Her laptop displayed Marcus Webb's latest email, his tone warm but insistent. "We need your answer by Friday. The world is waiting for what you've built." Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Can't sleep either? Want to grab coffee and talk through this?" 20 minutes later, they sat in the 24-hour diner near campus, the same place where they'd celebrated their first successful code deployment sophomore year. Alex looked tired, his usual optimistic energy dampened by the weight of their looming decision. 50 million changes everything, he said quietly, stirring his coffee without drinking it. But it also changes nothing. You're still the same person who built LearnFlow in our dorm room because she wanted to help kids learn better. Am I? Molly asked. Because sometimes I feel like I'm becoming someone else entirely. Someone who measures success in acquisition offers instead of user testimonials. That's the money talking, not you. Alex leaned forward. What did you feel like when that kid from Guatemala's mom wrote to thank you? When the refugee family said LearnFlow helped their daughter maintain her cultural identity while learning English? Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, Molly admitted. That feeling doesn't come with a price tag. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Helen's name appeared on the screen, an unprecedented call at this hour that sent alarm shooting through Molly's chest. Mom? Is everything okay? I couldn't sleep. Helen's voice was soft, tentative. I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, about LearnFlow helping families like ours. Could you show me how it works? Really show me? The request caught Molly completely off guard. Now. I know it's late, but I want to understand. Not just the money part, the part that matters to you. An hour later, Helen sat in Molly's apartment, watching intently as her daughter guided her through LearnFlow's interface. Molly demonstrated how the platform adapted to different learning styles, how it incorporated cultural context into lessons, how it recognized when students were struggling emotionally rather than intellectually. This section here, Molly explained, clicking to a module designed for English language learners, maintains students' native language skills while building English proficiency. It doesn't ask them to abandon their heritage to succeed academically. Helen was quiet for a long moment, her nurse's training evident in how carefully she examined each feature. This is what I needed when we first came to America, she said finally. Something that saw me as capable, rather than deficient. Something that built on what I already knew instead of dismissing it. That's exactly why I built it. And this acquisition, it would let you reach more families like ours? Millions more. Technova has the infrastructure to scale LearnFlow globally, the resources to translate it into dozens of languages, the partnerships to integrate it into school systems worldwide. Helen studied her daughter's face with the intensity she'd once brought to medical diagnoses. But you're afraid. Terrified, Molly admitted. What if I take their money and lose control of my vision? What if scaling it means compromising what makes it special? What if I become just another tech executive instead of someone who's trying to change education? What if you don't take it and miss the chance to help millions of children? The question hung between them like a bridge Molly had been afraid to cross. Helen reached across the small table, covering her daughter's hand with her own. When your father and I came to America, we had a choice. Stay safe in what we knew, or risk everything for the possibility of something better. We chose risk because we believed in a future we couldn't fully see. What if I fail? What if you succeed beyond anything you've imagined? Helen's smile was soft, proud. Molly, I spent 4 years being afraid that your unconventional path meant failure. I won't spend another day being afraid that your success means we'll lose you. You won't lose me. Then trust yourself. Trust that the person who built something beautiful can keep it beautiful even as it grows. As dawn broke across the campus, Molly made her choice. Not between family and success, but between fear and possibility. She opened her laptop and began typing the email that would change everything. Marcus, I accept Technova's offer with one condition. LearnFlow's mission remains unchanged. We're not just building technology. We're building bridges between cultures, between learning styles, between the world as it is and the world as it could be. Let's change education together. Molly! She hit send before fear could change her mind, then looked at her mother, who was beaming with a pride that felt genuine rather than conditional. Ready for what comes next? Helen asked. With my family behind me? I think I am. 3 months later, Golden Dragon Restaurant had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. A framed TechCrunch article hung near the entrance, local graduates' ed-tech platform acquired for $50 million, but it shared wall space with the restaurant's original business license and family photos spanning 2 decades. The past and future coexisted in careful harmony. Molly stood at the familiar corner table, her laptop open as she video called into Technova's weekly leadership meeting from 3,000 miles away. The acquisition had proceeded smoothly, but she'd negotiated something unprecedented, the ability to work remotely 2 weeks per month, maintaining her connection to the community that had shaped her vision. LearnFlow's user engagement is up 300% since integration, she reported to the screen full of executives. We're seeing particularly strong adoption in underserved communities, exactly as projected. Marcus Webb's voice came through clearly. Outstanding work, Molly. The board is thrilled with these numbers. As the call ended, Helen emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate of dumplings, not for a customer, but for her daughter's mid-afternoon break. The gesture felt like a small miracle, this casual integration of Molly's new life with the rhythms of family business. "How's California treating you?" Helen asked, settling into the booth across from her. "It's incredible. The resources, the team, the potential to scale LearnFlow globally. It's everything I dreamed of." Molly paused, studying her mother's face. "But this feels like home. This feels real." Helen smiled, the kind of expression that held years of understanding distilled into a single moment. "That's why you negotiated to split your time. You understood something it took me 40 years to learn. Success means nothing if it disconnects you from what matters." The restaurant's front door chimed, and Jennifer entered wearing scrubs that belonged to the community health clinic rather than the hospital. Her transition to social work had been challenging but transformative, her natural empathy finally channeled into work that fed her soul, rather than just her bank account. "How did the immigration advocacy meeting go?" Molly asked as Jennifer slid into their booth. "3 new families enrolled in our support program, including one whose daughter could really benefit from LearnFlow." Jennifer's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that had been missing during her medical residency. Her parents speak limited English. She's brilliant, but struggling in traditional classes. Exactly the kind of student your platform was designed to help. "I'll set up her account personally," Molly said, feeling the familiar satisfaction that came from connecting her technology to real human need. David appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, his face bright with the particular pride of a father watching his children thrive. "Mrs. Zhang just called," he announced. "Her grandson got into MIT. Apparently, he credited his application essay to inspiration from that brilliant Wilson girl who proved technology can change the world." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Mrs. Zhang, who'd questioned Molly's choices for years, now used her success to motivate other young people in their community. "Speaking of inspiration," Helen said, pulling a business enrollment form from her apron pocket, "I've decided to take online courses in business management. If my daughter can build a $50 million company, maybe it's time I learned how to properly expand our little restaurant." The revelation was stunning in its quiet revolution. Helen Chen, who'd spent decades sacrificing her own dreams for her family's advancement, finally ready to pursue her own version of success. "Mom, that's incredible." "You taught me something important," Helen said softly. "It's never too late to honor the dreams we deferred. And success isn't diminished when it takes unexpected forms." As evening approached and the restaurant prepared for its dinner rush, Molly closed her laptop and joined her family in the familiar ritual of preparation, checking inventory, arranging tables, reviewing the night's specials. But tonight felt different, celebratory, rather than routine. Alex arrived for dinner with his own parents, who'd driven down from Sacramento to meet the family behind the success story their son couldn't stop talking about. Jennifer's parents appeared shortly after, their initial shock at their daughter's career change softening into cautious pride as they watched her passion for her new work. Mrs. Zhang made her entrance with characteristic fanfare, bringing a cake decorated with LearnFlow's logo and announcing to anyone within earshot that she'd always known this family was destined for greatness. As Molly looked around the restaurant filled with the people who'd shaped her journey, family who'd learned to celebrate unconventional success, friends who'd supported her through doubt and breakthrough, community members who'd evolved from skepticism to pride, she understood something fundamental about achievement. True success wasn't measured solely in acquisition offers or media coverage. It was found in the integration of personal dreams with authentic relationships, in the ability to honor both individual vision and family bonds, in building something meaningful while maintaining connection to the people and places that defined home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. "Molly, the latest user testimonials are incredible. A refugee family in Seattle says LearnFlow helped their son maintain his cultural identity while excelling academically. This is exactly the impact we envisioned." But as Molly looked around the restaurant where her parents had built their American dream, where she'd learned the value of hard work and sacrifice, where her family now celebrated not just her financial success, but her commitment to making education accessible to families like theirs, She realized she'd found something more valuable than any acquisition offer. She'd found a way to honor both who she'd been and who she was becoming. A bridge between cultures, between generations, between dreams deferred and dreams fulfilled. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility and grounded in belonging. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.